The heel came down on the card like it was nothing, like it was trash. A little girl's handmade card, glitter glue and purple marker, the words, "For the kids," smeared into a puddle of snowmelt on the stone
You
steps
did
of a
this!
five-star
No,
hotel.
I didn't.
Please
The
stop
woman who
fighting!
stepped on it was
You
the
lied to
CEO
us!
I
of
had
the
no
Children's
choice.
Charity Foundation. The man she had just shoved aside, the man in the wet shoes. The man she called a fraud and ordered security to remove that man, controlled the $150 million trust fund that paid her salary. He owned the right to fire the entire board. He had built everything she was now using to humiliate his 8-year-old daughter. She just didn't know it yet. But what happened next inside that ballroom when 300 people watched a little girl hold up that ruined card and say 2 words to her dead mother's portrait, that is the part of this story you will never forget. Owen Fletcher had not worn this suit in 14 months. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror and pulled the knot of his tie, straight hands steady, which surprised him. The last time he had worn this tie, Sarah had been standing behind him, reaching around to fix the knot herself, because she said he always pulled it slightly to the left. She had been right about that. She had been right about most things. He turned. Emma was standing in the hallway, red velvet dress, black shoes with small silver buckles. Her hair was pulled back with a clip that Sarah had bought at a craft fair 2 summers ago. She was holding the envelope against her chest with both hands, the way a person holds something they have decided is important. "You look beautiful." The words came easier than he expected. "I know." Not with vanity, with the plain certainty of an 8-year-old who has looked in the mirror and made her assessment. "Are we going now?" Owen checked his watch. The drive from Denver to the Aspen Crown would take 90 minutes if the roads stayed clear. Snow had been falling for an hour. "We're going now." They walked to the car. The parking lot was white and quiet. Owen opened the passenger door, and Emma climbed in, still holding the envelope. He walked around to the driver's side, started the engine. The heater took a moment. Emma blew into her hands. "Dad, do you think there'll be a lot of people there?" "Probably." "Like how many?" "Maybe 300. She thought about this, staring straight ahead through the windshield at the falling snow. "That's a lot of people to help the kids." Owen looked at her. She had Sarah's eyes, not just the color, the steadiness behind them. He wanted to say something about her mother, wanted to say that Sarah would have been proud, but Emma already knew that. She did not need to be told things she already knew. That was one of the qualities she had inherited directly from Sarah, an impatience with unnecessary confirmation. "Yeah, that's a lot of people." They drove. The roads between Denver and the Aspen Crown Hotel were plowed but still slick in places. Owen drove carefully. He was always careful with Emma in the car. Sarah used to tease him about it, used to say he drove like a man transporting museum glass. "Dad, what if they don't let us in?" He glanced at her. "Why wouldn't they let us in?" "I don't know. What if they don't know who we are?" Owen almost smiled. Not quite. The muscles moved, but the expression did not fully arrive. "They'll know who we are, sweetheart." He said it with certainty. He had no reason to believe otherwise. He was wrong. They had not talked about the foundation much over the past 14 months. Owen had made a decision after Sarah's death, not a conscious one, more like a reflex, to separate Emma from the machinery of the organization. The board meetings, the financial calls, the operational discussions about program funding. He had told himself he was protecting her. What he had actually been doing was retreating, and he had taken Emma with him into that retreat without asking whether she wanted to go. 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday morning over pancakes, Emma had ended the retreat herself. She had come to the kitchen table holding a yellow legal pad. Owen recognized it immediately. It was Sarah's, the one from the nightstand, the one she had been writing on in the final weeks when she could no longer sit up without help but could still hold a pen. Emma set it on the table beside her plate. "I found Mom's notes." Owen put down his spatula. "Where did you find that?" "In the box in the hallway closet, the one with her things." Owen looked at the legal pad. Sarah's handwriting. Neat, organized, precise. Even at the end, even when the medication made her hands shake, her handwriting had remained clear. She had been that kind of person, the kind who insisted on clarity even when everything around her was falling apart. I read some of it. She wrote letters to the board. She told them what to do after. Emma paused. After she was gone. Owen sat down across from her. He did not reach for the legal pad. He was not ready to read it. He might never be ready to read it. "The last page," Emma said. "She wrote something." "What did she write?" Emma recited it from memory. She had clearly read it more than once. "Please don't let the children disappear." The kitchen was very quiet. The pancake on the stove was starting to burn. Owen could smell it but did not move. "Dad, I want to go to the gala." "Emma, I want to bring something for the kids. Mom would want me to bring something." He looked at his daughter for a long time. She looked back at him without wavering. She had Sarah's eyes, not just the color, the steadiness behind them. "Okay." That evening, Emma sat at the kitchen table with an index card, a bottle of gold glitter glue, a purple marker, and a small piece of ribbon for a bow. She worked on the card with the intense focus of a child who believes the thing she is making has to be exactly right. Owen stood at the stove making dinner and watched her without turning his head. She worked on it for 3 evenings. She revised the bow twice. She practiced the lettering on scrap paper before writing on the card itself. When she was done, she held it up. "For the kids," it said in purple marker with a gold glitter border and a small lopsided bow glued to the top corner. "That's perfect." "I know." She slid it into a cream-colored envelope and pressed the flap closed and wrote nothing on the outside because she said the card was for everyone, not for someone specific. Now in the car, she held that envelope against the front of her velvet dress as they pulled into the parking garage of the Aspen Crown. Owen turned off the engine. The garage was cold and the sound of their doors echoed. They walked together toward the exit through the garage across the short stretch of open sidewalk and into the falling snow. Owen put his hand on Emma's shoulder. The snow landed on her hair and on the envelope and on the toes of Owen's black dress shoes, which were already going pale from the cold. They reached the base of the stone steps. Above them the hotel entrance glowed. Gold-framed glass doors, warm light from the lobby shadows of guests moving inside. Owen took a breath. He had not been in this building since Sarah's funeral reception, which had been held in the second-floor event space 14 months ago. 300 people had come. He remembered almost none of it. Ready. Ready. They climbed the steps. A woman was standing just inside the entrance. She had dark hair swept sharply back and she wore a tailored black blazer and held a clipboard. She was already watching them. She had been watching them since the parking garage exit. Her name was Vanessa Cole. She had been appointed CEO of the Foundation's philanthropic division 14 months ago by the board during Owen's medical leave. A cardiac episode, mild, but enough to put him in the hospital for 4 days. 4 days during which the board had moved with a speed that in retrospect suggested the decision had been made before the ambulance arrived. Vanessa pushed the door open before they reached it. She stepped into the gap between the door and the frame, not quite blocking the entrance, but making it clear that the entrance was hers to grant. "This is a private event." Her voice was polite in the way that expensive things are polite, smooth on the surface and hard underneath. "Black tie invitations only." "We have an invitation." Owen reached into his jacket pocket and produced the cream envelope, the formal invitation that had been sent to his home address, his name embossed on the front in gold lettering. He held it out to her. Vanessa glanced at the envelope. She did not take it. "That name is not on my current list. We updated the guest registry last week. My name is Owen Fletcher." She tilted her head, not with recognition, not even with curiosity, with impatience, the look a person gives when they have already categorized you and are now waiting for you to accept the category. "I understand that's what you'd like me to believe." She lowered her voice slightly as though she were doing him a courtesy by being discreet. "But we've had individuals before who attempt to use this kind of occasion to solicit. It's disruptive for our guests. It's disruptive for the children we're here to support. Owen's hand was still extended, holding the invitation. "I'm asking you to look at the invitation." "Sir," the word dropped the temperature between them by several degrees. "I'm going to ask you to step back from the entrance." "I'm not stepping back. My daughter and I are here for the gala. My wife built this foundation." Vanessa reached forward and took Owen's arm. Not gently, not the way you guide someone, the way you move an obstacle. She gripped his forearm through the wool of his jacket and pulled him 2 steps to the side, away from the center of the doorway, toward the iron railing that ran along the edge of the landing. His dress shoe caught the edge of the wet granite. His foot slid. He stumbled sideways, catching himself on the railing with his free hand. The motion was awkward and sudden, the kind of movement that strips a person of composure in an instant. Emma made a sound, not a scream, a sharp intake of breath, the specific noise a child makes when the world does something it is not supposed to do. The cream-colored envelope fell from Emma's hand. It struck the wet stone and opened on impact. The card slid out: gold glitter glue, purple marker, a lopsided bow, "for the kids." It landed face up in a thin puddle of snowmelt. Vanessa looked down at it, and then she stepped forward and the heel of her shoe came down on the corner of the card. It was not deliberate. Or maybe it was. It did not matter. The heel pressed into the card, and the sound it made was very small and very final. The glitter smeared, the ink bled, the corner crumpled under the weight. Security. Vanessa lifted her chin toward the 2 guards visible just inside the lobby. "Please remove these 2 from the entrance." Owen looked at the card on the ground. He looked at the heel mark on it. He looked at the glitter dissolving into the snowmelt. Then he crouched down slowly and picked it up. The bottom corner was wet and torn. The bow was crushed. The purple letters had smudged, but you could still read them. "For the kids." He held the card in both hands and looked at it for a long moment, and his face was very still. "She made that card." It was Emma's voice. Quiet, steady, the particular steadiness of a child who is using every bit of control she has not to break apart. "My mom, she told me to bring something." Vanessa's expression did not change. "I'm sorry for your loss." She said it the way a person reads a line from a script they did not write. "It's for the kids," Emma said. She was looking at the card in her father's hands. "Mom said if we stopped helping the kids it would have all been for nothing." Vanessa's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. She looked at Emma, then at Owen, and then she said something quietly under her breath, almost to herself. "The dead mother angle is very moving." The words hung in the cold air between the 3 of them. They did not dissipate. They did not soften. They sat in the space where they had been spoken, and they stayed. It did not matter whether Vanessa intended Emma to hear it. Owen heard it. And from the way Emma's face went blank, the way her eyes stopped blinking, the way her body went completely still in her red velvet dress on the wet stone landing, Owen understood that his daughter had heard it too. He felt something in his chest. It was not grief. He had lived inside grief for 14 months. He knew its weight, its texture, the way it sat behind his ribs like a second heartbeat. This was not that. This was past grief, on the other side of it, something cold and clear and absolutely composed. "Emma," he said softly, "can you hold this for me?" He handed her the card. She took it with both hands and held it against her chest. She held it the way a soldier holds a flag, not loosely, not carelessly, as though someone had trusted her with it, and she had decided she would not let go. Owen straightened. He adjusted his jacket. He wiped the snowmelt from his hands, and he turned to face Vanessa Cole with the particular stillness of a man who has made a decision that he will not revisit. Not tonight, not ever. "My name is Owen Fletcher. I am the sole trustee of the Sarah Fletcher Memorial Trust. I hold control over the $150 million endowment fund that finances this foundation, this building lease, and your employment contract." He paused. Not for effect, because what he said next needed to arrive clearly. "I would like you to check that claim before you say another word." Vanessa's expression moved. It was involuntary, the kind of rearrangement a face makes when the floor beneath it has shifted and the body has not yet caught up. She had heard the name. She would have had to be completely recklessly incurious not to have heard it given her position. But names heard in boardroom briefings and names standing on a wet hotel landing in scuffed shoes exist in different realities. She was now watching those two realities collide. Her clipboard dropped slightly in her hand. "Mr. Fletcher," she said the way people say a name when they are hoping the name turns out to be wrong. "The board was informed that you were on an extended personal leave, that you were unavailable." "I was grieving," Owen said. "I'm here now." He reached into his pocket and held out his phone. The screen showed 3 missed calls from a contact saved as D. Westbrook, bored, and a text message from the same number sent 11 minutes ago. "Owen, I understand you're at the door. Please come in immediately. We need to talk." Vanessa read the screen. Her face performed another calculation, the kind that involves the distance between who you are and who you have just been in front of witnesses. Slowly, she handed the phone back. Her clipboard slipped from her other hand and struck the stone with a flat, sharp crack. She did not bend to pick it up. The lobby door pushed open. Daniel Westbrook stepped out into the cold. 62 years old, broad shoulders, a tuxedo that had been tailored for a man who used to be larger. He extended his hand immediately. "Owen, come inside, please. Both of you." Daniel looked at Vanessa, then at Emma, then at the damaged card Emma was holding against her dress. His expression changed in a way that was small and painful to watch. "Thank you, Daniel." Owen put his hand on Emma's shoulder and guided her toward the door. He did not look at Vanessa, not because he was avoiding her, because she had stopped being relevant. They stepped through the glass doors and into the warmth of the lobby. Emma pressed closer to his side. Her hand found his hand and held it. "Dad, is it over?" Owen looked down at his daughter. Her face was tired and alert at the same time. The face of a child who has just been through something she should not have had to go through. "Not yet, but we're inside now." He squeezed her hand. They walked forward into the warm amber light, and 60 pairs of eyes turned to watch them. And Owen Fletcher stopped in the center of the lobby because something was wrong. Something was missing from the walls, and in its place was something that should not have been there. The north wall had always held photographs. That was the first thing Sarah had insisted on when they designed this space together 11 years ago. She had stood in this exact spot with a roll of blue painter's tape and marked where each frame would hang. Not corporate logos, not brand statements. Photographs. Children at program graduations. Families moving into stable housing. Kids sitting cross-legged on gymnasium floors at the summer reading initiative in Pueblo. A boy holding up a certificate with both hands and grinning so wide you could count the gap where his front teeth used to be. Those photographs were gone. Every single one. In their place, mounted behind glass in 4 different sizes, was the Greystone Capital corporate logo. Polished, symmetrical, expensive. The kind of display that exists to tell people with money that their money is in serious hands. The kind of display that has nothing to do with children. Owen's hand tightened at his side. Emma was still holding his other hand. She was looking up at the wall too, but she did not recognize what was missing. She had been too young during the last gala to remember the photographs in detail. She only knew that something about her father's posture had changed. "Dad, what's wrong?" Owen did not answer immediately. He was counting. The wall had held 43 photographs the last time he had been here. 43 faces, 43 children whose lives had been changed by the foundation Sarah built. Now there were 4 logos. "Daniel." His voice was quiet, but Daniel Westbrook heard it and came closer immediately. "What happened to the photographs?" Daniel looked at the wall. His jaw tightened. That was one of the changes made in the restructuring. Vanessa and Richard Holloway pushed it through the Communications Committee in September. They called it a brand alignment initiative. A brand alignment initiative. Owen repeated the words the way you say something that tastes wrong. "I voted against it. For whatever that's worth now. I was outnumbered 3-2. "Who voted for it?" "Richard, Vanessa, and Paul Brennan." Owen knew Paul Brennan. Sarah had brought him onto the board 5 years ago because he ran a logistics company, and she said the foundation needed someone who understood supply chains. Paul had always been quiet in meetings, agreeable, the kind of board member who nods first and asks questions later. Owen had never thought much about him either way. Now he thought about him. "Where is Richard?" Daniel hesitated. "He's inside, table 7 near the windows." "Owen, there are things I need to show you tonight, things that go beyond the photographs." "I can see that." "Not here. After the program. I have documents." Owen looked at Daniel. Daniel met his eyes and held them. And in that look was something Owen had not expected. It was not just concern. It was fear. Daniel Westbrook was afraid, not of Owen, of what Owen was about to find. "Fine. After the program." He turned back toward the lobby. 60 guests had been watching the confrontation at the entrance, some openly, some from behind champagne glasses and turned shoulders. Now they were watching Owen with a different kind of attention. Several were holding their phones at hip-level screens angled upward. Owen was aware of this. He did not care about it. What he cared about was the fact that his dead wife's photographs had been pulled off the wall of the foundation she built and replaced with a corporate logo, and that somewhere inside this building 300 people were attending a gala in Sarah's name, raising money in Sarah's name, and the woman who had just shoved Owen aside at the entrance and stepped on his daughter's card was the person they had put in charge. He thought about the yellow legal pad. Please don't let the children disappear. He had let them disappear. Not deliberately, not maliciously, but through absence, which in the end produced the same result. "I'd like to say something." He did not say it loudly. He did not raise his voice. He spoke at conversational volume standing in the center of the lobby. And the room went quiet in the specific way a room goes quiet when the people in it understand that the atmosphere has shifted and the next thing said will matter. Daniel put a hand on his arm. "Owen, are you sure you want to do this here?" "Yes." Daniel removed his hand. He stepped back half a step, not away from Owen beside him. It was a small movement, but several people in the lobby noticed it. And what they noticed was that the board chairman of the foundation had just physically positioned himself next to the man in the wet shoes and not next to the woman with the clipboard. "My name is Owen Fletcher. I founded Greystone Capital 22 years ago. Through our philanthropic division, I established the Sarah Fletcher Children's Foundation, which tonight in my wife's name is hosting this gala." He paused. Not for effect, because the next sentence was harder to say than he had expected. "My wife built this foundation from scratch. She died 14 months ago. My daughter made a card to bring tonight because her mother asked her to keep helping. That card was stepped on at the entrance by the woman who was appointed to run the organization my wife created." He let the sentence end there. He did not elaborate. He did not describe what had happened on the landing. He did not need to. 11 people had filmed it. "I would like someone to explain to me why the photographs of the children we serve have been removed from this wall." Nobody spoke. A woman near the coat check put her hand over her mouth. A man in a navy tuxedo looked at the floor. Near the back of the lobby, half hidden by a stone column, a man in a gray tuxedo took a quiet step sideways, creating distance between himself and the spot where he had just been standing. That man was Richard Holloway. Owen saw the movement. He filed it. Vanessa Cole had followed them inside. She was standing near the entrance with the composure of someone who has not yet decided which version of this situation she is losing. Her clipboard was gone. She had left it on the stone outside. Her hands hung at her sides, and for the first time since Owen had seen her, she was not holding anything between herself and the room. Owen looked at her. "Your employment with the Greystone Group and its affiliated foundations is terminated, effective immediately. Human Resources will be in contact regarding severance documentation." He said it without heat, without anger, without raising his voice even slightly, which made it considerably worse than if he had shouted. The 2 security guards who had been moving toward Owen at Vanessa's instruction had stopped. They looked at each other. They looked at Owen. They looked at Daniel Westbrook standing beside Owen. They moved back to their stations by the door. Vanessa stood still for a moment. Her face went through something that was not quite an expression. It was more like a series of calculations arriving at the same answer from different directions. And the answer was that this was real, and it was not going to reverse, and the 60 people in this lobby had just watched it happen. She walked to the reception desk. She set something down on it. Owen did not see what. Then she walked to the side exit, opened the door, and left. The door closed behind her with a soft, definitive sound. The kind of sound that ends a chapter. A murmur moved through the lobby, voices low and uncertain, the sound of people reassessing the evening they had walked into. Daniel touched Owen's arm again. "The ballroom, come." Owen looked down at Emma. She was still holding the card against her chest. She had not moved during his entire speech. She had stood beside him with her back straight and her chin up, and she had not cried. She had done exactly what her mother would have done. She had stood her ground. "You okay?" Emma nodded. "Are we going inside now?" "We're going inside now." The ballroom was through the carved mahogany doors at the end of the corridor. Daniel pushed them open, and Owen and Emma walked through. 300 people turned to look. Owen had expected that. He had expected the heads turning, the whispers, the phones. He had prepared himself for the attention. What he had not prepared himself for was the portrait. It was 20 feet tall, commissioned for the Gala's 10th anniversary 3 years ago. It had been in the building's archives since Sarah's death. Someone had brought it out and hung it on the far wall of the ballroom, centered above the stage, lit from above by 2 soft spotlights. The portrait showed Sarah at a foundation site visit. She was crouching beside a 7-year-old boy in a winter coat that was 2 sizes too large. Sarah was laughing. Her hair was falling across her face. The boy was pointing at something outside the frame, and Sarah was looking at whatever it was with the expression she always wore when a child showed her something. Full attention, full delight, as though nothing else in the world existed. Owen stopped walking. His chest locked. He could not have moved forward in that moment if someone had pushed him. Daniel had done this. Owen understood it immediately. Daniel had given the instruction to hang the portrait the moment he learned Owen was coming. It was not a gesture. It was a correction. It was Daniel saying without words, "This is what this room is supposed to look like." Owen stood in the doorway of the ballroom and looked at his wife's face, 20 feet tall and radiant. And for the first time in 14 months, grief hit him not as weight, but as warmth. Not as something pressing down, but as something breaking open. Emma stopped beside him. She looked up at the portrait. She looked at it for a long time. The room was so quiet that Owen could hear the candle flames on the nearest table shifting in the draft from the open door. "Hi, Mom." Emma said it simply. The way she used to say it when Sarah came into the kitchen in the morning. The way she said it when Sarah picked her up from school. There was no performance in it. There was no awareness of the 300 people watching. There was only a girl talking to her mother. The chamber trio near the stage had stopped playing. A woman near the front of the ballroom pressed the back of her hand to her mouth and turned away. A man at a center table removed his glasses and set them on the linen tablecloth and looked down. Emma held up the card, the wet, glitter-smudged, heel-marked card. She held it up toward the portrait the way a child holds up a drawing for a parent's approval. "I brought it, like you said." Owen put his hand on her shoulder. He did not trust himself to speak. He was aware that his eyes were burning and his throat had closed, and that 300 people were watching him, and that it did not matter. None of it mattered. What mattered was that his daughter was talking to her mother, and her mother could not answer, and the card she had made with such care over 3 evenings at the kitchen table was damaged, but she had brought it anyway. That was what Sarah would have said to do. Bring it anyway. Even if it's imperfect, even if it's damaged. Bring it. The chamber trio began playing again, something slow and soft. The room exhaled. Owen guided Emma to a table near the front. Daniel had reserved seats for them, which meant Daniel had known Owen was coming before Owen had arrived at the entrance, which meant Daniel had been trying to reach him. Owen remembered the missed calls on his phone, 3 from Daniel. He had ignored them during the drive. He had not been ignoring Daniel specifically. He had been ignoring everything connected to the foundation for 14 months. The calls had been one more thing he was not ready for. He pulled out Emma's chair and she sat down and placed the card carefully on the table in front of her, smoothing the damaged corner with her fingertip. Owen sat beside her. A waiter came. Water for both of them. Emma took a sip and looked around the ballroom with wide, careful eyes. She was taking it in the ceiling, the string lights, the candles, the people. She had never been to a gala before. Sarah had always said she was too young. Sarah had planned to bring her when she turned 10. Sarah had not made it to 10. Dad, this is what Mom built. This is what Mom built. It's big. It started small. It started at our kitchen table. Emma considered this. Our kitchen table. Our old house. Before you were born. Mom and I sat at the kitchen table and she told me she wanted to start a foundation. She had a notebook. She had a plan. She had already talked to 3 families who needed help. Owen paused. She didn't ask me for permission. She asked me for a folding table and a phone line. What did you say? I said yes. I always said yes to your mother when she had that look. What look? The look that meant she had already decided and was giving me the courtesy of pretending I had a choice. Emma smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real, and it broke something in Owen's chest that needed to be broken. The first course was served. Owen did not eat much. Emma ate everything on her plate and asked if there was more bread. Owen flagged a waiter and got her more bread. She buttered it with the precision of a surgeon. Around them, the gala continued. Speeches were given from the stage. A video played showing clips of children in the programs. Owen watched the video and recognized several of the locations. The community center in Pueblo, the gymnasium in Colorado Springs, the housing campus in Denver. Sarah had driven to each of those sites personally, sometimes 3 in a week, sometimes with Emma asleep in the car seat in the back. After the first course, Daniel appeared at the table. He came without a plate. He sat down across from Owen and placed a manila folder on the linen between them. He had the look of a man who had been trying to have this conversation for a very long time. I need you to look at these. Not in detail, not tonight, but you need to see them. Owen looked at the folder. It was thick. The corners were worn in a way that suggested it had been opened and closed many times. What is it? Financial decisions that were made in your absence. Decisions that should have required your authorization. Decisions that should have been yours and only yours to approve. Owen opened the folder. He did not read the documents in detail. This was not the time or the place, but he read enough. He read the summary pages. He read the budget reallocations. He read the line items. The Foundation's core youth programs in Denver and Colorado Springs had been defunded. The after-school tutoring initiative gone. The transitional housing stipend program gone. The school supply distribution network that had operated in 4 counties for 9 years suspended. The money had been redirected to a budget line described as organizational infrastructure and executive capacity building. Owen had spent 22 years in business. He knew what those words meant. They meant the money had been moved somewhere it was not supposed to go. There was more. A series of payments to a consulting firm called Summit Strategy Partners. No prior relationship with the foundation. No documented deliverables. 12 payments over 11 months. Owen added them in his head before he reached the bottom of the summary sheet where Daniel had circled a number in red ink. $82 million. Owen looked at the number. He read it again. He closed the folder slowly and placed both hands flat on the table. Summit Strategy Partners. Registered in Delaware, Daniel said. The sole listed officer is a name that appears nowhere else in public records. No LinkedIn, no business filings, no tax history. It's a ghost. We believe it's a shell company. Who signed the authorizations? Richard Holloway. Every single one. But some of these approvals required board-level sign-off. And the signatures on file are... Daniel paused, choosing the word carefully. Irregular. Irregular how? As in we believe they were forged. Owen sat very still. Across the ballroom, Richard Holloway was at his table near the windows. He was laughing at something a woman beside him had said. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had no concerns in the world, who had never authorized a fraudulent payment, who had never defunded a children's literacy program and funneled the money into a Delaware shell company. He looked like a man who believed he was safe. Who else knows about this? 3 people on the board, our outside counsel, and Vanessa Cole. Daniel lowered his voice. She signed 2 of the authorizations. Whether she fully understood what she was signing, he stopped. I don't know. I think the answer is that she understood enough. Owen looked at the folder. He looked at the red circle around the number. $82 million. Money that was supposed to reach children. Money that Sarah had raised through years of phone calls and grant applications and gala speeches and site visits. Money that was supposed to prevent children from disappearing. He thought about the yellow legal pad. He thought about Emma finding it in the hallway closet. He thought about her sitting at the kitchen table reciting the last line from memory. Please don't let the children disappear. They had not just let the children disappear. They had taken the money that was keeping them visible and stolen it. I want a full forensic audit. Every account, every transaction going back 4 years. I want the team in the office Monday morning. I've already made preliminary contact with a firm. They can start Monday. And I want outside counsel to contact the appropriate federal offices. Daniel nodded. I'll make the call tonight. Owen slid the folder back across the table. He looked at Emma. She had finished her bread and was working on the smeared corner of her card with the edge of a napkin, carefully trying to clean the glitter, gently pressing the torn corner flat. She was focused entirely on the card. She had not heard the conversation. Owen watched her for a moment, her small hands working carefully on the damaged thing she had made, trying to fix it, trying to make it right again. He looked back at Daniel. Monday morning. Daniel took the folder and stood. He looked at Owen for a moment longer than necessary, and in that look was something Owen recognized. Relief. Daniel Westbrook had been carrying this alone, or nearly alone, for months, waiting for Owen to come back, hoping Owen would come back, not knowing if he would. It's good to see you, Owen. It's good to be here. And he meant it in a way that surprised him. Daniel walked away. Owen sat at the table beside his daughter. She had gotten the worst of the glitter smear off the card and was now examining her work with a critical eye. The card was still damaged. The corner was still torn. The heel mark was still visible, but the words were legible. For the kids. Emma looked up at the portrait of her mother on the far wall. Sarah's face 20 feet tall, laughing, full of life, full of the particular joy she carried whenever she was doing the work she loved. Mom would be mad, Emma said. Owen looked at her. About what? About what that lady did at the door. Yeah, she would be. But she'd say we still have to help the kids. Owen felt his throat tighten. Yeah, she would say that too. Emma nodded as though confirming something she already knew. She placed the card back on the table, centered between her plate and her water glass, and she straightened it one more time. Then she folded her hands in her lap and looked up at the portrait again. We're going to fix it, Mom. She said it quietly. She said it the way she had said, "Hi, Mom," when they first walked in, without performance, without awareness of the room, as a simple statement of fact spoken to someone she loved, whether that someone could hear her or not. Owen put his arm around his daughter's shoulder and held her close. Around them the gala continued. The chamber trio played. Waiters moved between tables. 300 people in formal wear carried on their conversations. And somewhere in a manila folder that Daniel Westbrook had just carried back to his seat, $82 million sat in a column of numbers, circled in red, waiting. The gala ended at 11. Owen carried Emma to the car because she had fallen asleep at the table with her cheek resting on her folded arms and the card tucked under her hand. He lifted her carefully, and she stirred but did not wake. Her head settled against his shoulder. The red velvet dress was wrinkled at the waist where she had been leaning forward. Daniel walked with them to the parking garage. Neither man spoke until they reached Owen's car. Owen shifted Emma's weight to open the rear door, and Daniel reached past him and opened it instead. Thank you. Daniel stood with his hands in his coat pockets. His breath came out in thin clouds under the garage lights. I should have pushed harder. I should have come to your house. I should have forced the conversation months ago." Owen settled Emma into the back seat and buckled her seatbelt. She murmured something and turned her face toward the window. He closed the door gently. "You tried calling. I didn't answer. I should have driven over. Maybe, but I wouldn't have opened the door." Owen leaned against the car. "I wasn't ready, Daniel. I thought if I stayed away from all of it, stayed away from the foundation, the board, the offices, all of it, that it would protect her." He nodded toward the back seat where Emma was sleeping. "I thought distance was the same thing as safety. And now," Owen looked at him, "now I know that distance is just distance, and the people who filled the space I left did not fill it with anything good." Daniel nodded slowly. "The audit firm is Tarrant and Associates. Helen Tarrant is the lead partner. She's sharp. She's handled 3 nonprofit fraud cases in the last 5 years, 2 of which resulted in federal prosecution. She can have a team in the office by 7:30 Monday morning. Tell her 7. 7 it is." Owen drove home in silence. Emma slept the entire way. He carried her inside and put her to bed without changing her out of the velvet dress because he did not want to wake her. He pulled the blanket up to her chin and stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. Then he went to the kitchen and sat down at the table and opened his laptop and did something he had not done in 14 months. He logged into the Foundation's administrative portal. His credentials still worked. Nobody had thought to revoke his access, or nobody had dared. He spent 3 hours reading financial statements, board minutes, budget proposals, staffing changes, every document filed since Sarah's death. He read the way a man reads when he is looking for the shape of a betrayal. Not the details yet, but the outline, the architecture of how it was built. By 2 in the morning, he had the outline. The restructuring had begun within 3 weeks of his medical leave. Vanessa Cole had been appointed first. Then Richard Holloway had been elevated to CFO, a position that had not existed in Sarah's organizational structure because Sarah believed in flat hierarchies and direct accountability. Richard had created the position for himself with board approval and then used it to consolidate control over all financial authorizations. The programs had been defunded incrementally, not all at once. That would have been too visible. Instead, budgets were reduced by 15% in the first quarter, then by 30% in the second, then suspended entirely by the third. Each reduction was accompanied by a memo from Richard explaining that the Foundation was undergoing a strategic review to improve efficiency and maximize donor impact. The language was perfect. It was the kind of language that sounds responsible and means nothing. It was the kind of language that let you gut a children's literacy program while describing it as operational optimization. Owen closed the laptop at 2:15. He sat in the dark kitchen and listened to the house, the furnace cycling, the clock in the hallway ticking, the faint sound of Emma breathing in her room down the hall. Sarah would have caught this. She would have seen the first budget reduction and demanded an explanation. She would have read the memos and recognized them for what they were. She had always been able to see through institutional language to the intention beneath it. It was one of her gifts. Owen had the gift of building things. Sarah had the gift of seeing what was wrong with what had been built. But Sarah was gone. And Owen had been gone too in his own way. And in the space they left, Richard Holloway had built something very ugly very quickly. Owen went to bed. He did not sleep well. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold. Owen woke at 6 and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with his phone. He had 43 missed calls, 27 voicemails, 16 text messages from numbers he did not recognize. He opened his phone and scrolled through the messages. Most were from journalists. 3 were from television producers. 2 were from people he had worked with at Greystone years ago and had not spoken to since. 1 was from a neighbor he had never met. It said simply, "Your daughter is braver than most adults I know." He put the letter in the drawer with Sarah's things. Emma came into the kitchen at 8:30, still in the velvet dress. Her hair was tangled and there was a crease on her cheek from the pillowcase. "Morning, sweetheart." "Morning." She climbed into her chair and looked at him. "Dad, a boy in my class, texted me. He said his mom saw us on the internet. Owen put down his coffee. What did he see? He said his mom showed him a video of a lady being mean to us at a hotel. He said it had a lot of views. He asked me if I was famous. What did you tell him? I told him no. I told him we were just trying to help the kids and someone was rude. She paused. Was that the right answer? Owen looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror of his memory, 8 years old. Red velvet dress, damaged card against her chest. Not crying. That was exactly the right answer. He also said his mom cried when she watched it. Owen did not respond to that. He had not watched the footage himself, but he knew it existed. Daniel had called him Sunday morning at 7 to tell him. 11 different people had filmed the confrontation at the entrance. By midnight Saturday, the clips had been viewed 3 million times. By Sunday morning, 6 million. The clips that spread fastest were not the confrontation. They were not Vanessa grabbing Owen's arm or the heel coming down on the card. They were the 2 seconds afterward, Emma holding the damaged card against her chest, standing very straight, not crying. An 8-year-old girl in a red velvet dress refusing to break. Owen had avoided his phone for most of the weekend after that first check, but one text had come through from an unknown number late Saturday night. He had read it and then stared at it for a long time. You should have stayed away. This is bigger than you understand. Walk away now, or everyone learns what Sarah really did with that inheritance. He had shown it to Daniel over the phone. Daniel had been quiet for a long moment. It's a bluff. They're panicking. Maybe. Owen, they're panicking because you're here. Because you fired Vanessa. Because they know the audit is coming. This is what people do when they're cornered, they threaten. Owen had not been so sure, but he had said nothing more about it. Now, Sunday morning, Emma was eating cereal and reading a book propped against the milk carton. She had changed out of the dress and into jeans and a sweatshirt. The card was in her backpack. Owen had seen her put it there before breakfast. Dad, are the kids getting their money back? We're working on it. How long does that take? A while. But we're going to make sure the programs start again first. The money for the programs, we can fix that quickly. The rest takes longer. How much longer? Months. Maybe more. Emma thought about this. That's a long time for kids to wait. Owen looked at her. She was staring out the window, watching the houses go by in her mind. Her backpack was on the chair beside her and the card was in the front pocket. She had been carrying it to school every day. He had discovered this Tuesday morning when he saw her slip it into the pocket before heading out the door. You're right. It is a long time. That's why we're starting the programs back up this week. Emma turned to look at him. This week. This week. Which ones? The reading program first, the one in Pueblo, Mom's program. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Good. Monday morning, Owen dropped Emma at school and drove to the Foundation's offices. He arrived at 6:45. Helen Tarrant and her team of 4 auditors arrived at 6:55. Helen was 53, tall, gray-haired, with the demeanor of a woman who had spent decades examining numbers that people did not want examined. She shook Owen's hand in the lobby. Mr. Fletcher, Daniel briefed me over the weekend. I've reviewed the preliminary documents he provided. You have a significant problem. I already know I have a significant problem. You have a bigger problem than you think. She said it without drama. She said it the way a doctor delivers results plainly, because decoration does not help. The consulting firm Summit Strategy Partners. It's not just a pass-through. Based on the payment patterns and the registration details, I believe we're looking at a multi-layered shell structure. Delaware is the primary filing, but there are secondary entities. At least 2, possibly more. How much time do you need? Give me the week. I'll have a preliminary scope assessment by Wednesday. Full report by Friday. You have until Wednesday. I want federal notification by Thursday. Helen raised an eyebrow. That's aggressive. $82 million was stolen from children's programs. I don't have a lot of patience for caution right now. She studied him for a moment. Wednesday. I'll make it work. The auditors went to work. They moved through the Foundation's offices with the quiet, methodical efficiency of people who have done this before and know exactly which drawers to open first. Owen gave them full access, every server, every filing cabinet, every email archive. He spent the morning in Sarah's office. It had been converted into a conference room 6 months ago. Her desk was gone. Her bookshelves were gone. The framed photograph of Emma that had sat on her desk since Emma was 3 was gone. In its place was a long table, 8 chairs, and a whiteboard with the words Q4 Strategic Priorities written across the top in red marker. Owen stood in the doorway and looked at the room that used to be his wife's and felt the cold, composed thing in his chest again. The thing that was past grief, the thing that had edges. At 11:30, Helen knocked on the door frame. "You need to see something." Owen followed her to the small office they had converted into their temporary workspace. 2 of her auditors were sitting at laptops with spreadsheets open on both screens. Helen pulled a chair out for Owen and sat down across from him. "We found the literacy program, Sarah's program, the one she built for rural Colorado. I know the program. She built it from scratch, 900 kids across 3 counties. It was defunded 6 months ago. Every dollar of its budget was moved into the administrative line. But that's not what I wanted to show you." She turned one of the laptops toward him. "This is the payment record for Summit Strategy Partners. 12 payments over 11 months, as you know. But we've now identified the secondary entities. There are 2 LLCs filed at the same Delaware address. One is called Ridgeline Advisory Group. The other is called Peak Outcomes Consulting. I've never heard of either one. Nobody has. They don't have websites. They don't have employees. They don't have clients. What they do have are bank accounts that receive transfers from Summit Strategy Partners totaling an additional $41 million. Owen sat back in his chair. 41 million on top of the 82. On top of the 82, the total exposure as of what we found this morning is approximately $123 million. Owen said nothing for a long time. Helen let the silence sit. She understood that some numbers need time to be absorbed before they can be responded to. 123 million. Owen said it the way you say a number you cannot quite believe exists. That's not just the Foundation's operating budget, that's endowment money, that's principal. Yes, they went into the endowment. Whoever structured this understood exactly where the money was and exactly how to move it without triggering the standard oversight mechanisms. Richard had the access. Whether he had the sophistication to design the shell structure himself is another question. This was not amateur work, Mr. Fletcher. This was built by someone who understood nonprofit financial architecture at a very high level. Owen thought about Richard Holloway laughing at his table at the Gala. Relaxed, comfortable, a glass of wine in his hand, the face of a man who believed he had gotten away with it. What about Vanessa Cole? Helen pulled up another screen. She signed 2 of the 12 authorizations. Both were for Summit Strategy Partners. Both were for amounts just under the threshold that would have triggered automatic board review. One for $950,000, one for $975,000. Just under $1 million each time. Exactly under. That's not a coincidence. Someone told her where to sign and how much to approve. Whether she knew the full scope of what she was enabling is a question for the prosecutors, not for us. Owen stood. He walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. A normal Monday. Cars arriving, people going to work. The ordinary machinery of a day continuing while inside this building the evidence of a massive theft was being assembled page by page. Sarah built this foundation to help children who had nothing. She worked on it until she could not sit up anymore. She wrote notes from her hospital bed so that the work would continue after she was gone. He turned from the window. I want every dollar traced. I want every account identified. I want the full architecture of what they built. And I want it documented so completely that when the federal prosecutors open the file, they don't have a single question that isn't already answered. Helen nodded. That's what we do. By Wednesday afternoon, the scope had expanded beyond anything Daniel had anticipated when he first brought the manila folder to Owen's table at the Gala. The auditors had identified not 2 but 4 subsidiary entities connected to the Delaware filing address. They had traced wire transfers across 3 states. They had found forged signatures on 7 board authorization signatures that were supposed to belong to 2 board members who, when contacted by Helen's team, confirmed they had never seen the documents in question. Helen delivered the preliminary assessment to Owen in a conference call at 4 on Wednesday. Owen was at his kitchen table. Emma was at a friend's house after school. The house was quiet. 42 potential counts: wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, money laundering through the nonprofit structure, forgery of authorizing signatures, and depending on how the prosecutors want to frame the endowment withdrawals, potential embezzlement charges. The total $123 million confirmed. There may be more. We're still pulling threads on a 5th entity that appeared in the records this morning. If that one is connected, we could be looking at 140-150. Owen wrote the number on a piece of paper. $123 million. He looked at it. He thought about what that money was supposed to have done, how many children it was supposed to have fed, how many families it was supposed to have housed, how many kids were supposed to have learned to read because Sarah Fletcher decided they deserved the chance. Contact the federal offices tomorrow morning. Already scheduled. I have a call with the U.S. Attorney's Office at 9. Owen hung up. He sat at the kitchen table and looked at the number on the piece of paper. A children's literacy program that served 900 kids in rural Colorado. Defunded. A transitional housing stipend that kept families off the street in Denver. Defunded. An after-school tutoring initiative that Sarah had launched with a single volunteer in a church basement. Defunded. A school supply distribution network that had operated in 4 counties for 9 years. Suspended. All of it gone. All of it folded into budget lines with names like organizational infrastructure and executive capacity building. All of it converted into wire transfers to shell companies in Delaware. Owen picked up his phone and called Daniel. "How long did you know?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I started noticing irregularities in June. Small things at first. Budget lines that didn't match board approvals. Payments to vendors I didn't recognize. I raised it with Paul Brennan at a board meeting in July, and he told me it was part of the new operational strategy. I didn't believe him, but I didn't have proof." "When did you get proof?" "October. I hired a private forensic accountant on my own, paid for it out of my own pocket. He found the Summit Strategy Partners payments within 2 weeks. That's when I started trying to reach you." "And I didn't answer." "No, you didn't." Owen closed his eyes. "I'm sorry, Daniel. You don't owe me an apology. You lost your wife. You were grieving. No one expected you to be monitoring financial statements. Sarah expected me to. She trusted me to protect what she built." Daniel did not respond to that. There was nothing to respond to. It was true. "What about Richard? Has anyone spoken to him since the gala?" "He was in the office Monday and Tuesday. He acted as if nothing had happened. He went to lunch. He took calls. He signed a requisition for new office furniture on Tuesday afternoon." New office furniture. A standing desk and an ergonomic chair. $1,400. Owen almost laughed. It was not funny. It was grotesque. A man who had stolen $123 million from a children's charity was ordering himself a standing desk. He doesn't know about the audit. He knows auditors are in the building. He asked Helen's team what they were working on, and they told him it was a routine compliance review. He seemed satisfied with that answer. Of course he did. Men like Richard are always satisfied with the answer that lets them keep going. Thursday morning, Richard Holloway attempted to leave the country. He booked a flight under a variant of his name, Richard D. Holloway, to R.D. Strickland to Miami via Dallas, departing from Denver International Airport. He had packed 1 suitcase. He had not told anyone at the foundation he was leaving. He had not submitted a leave request. He had simply booked the ticket at 2 in the morning and driven to the airport at 5. Owen learned about this at 7:30 Thursday morning when Helen called him. "The U.S. Attorney's Office moved fast, faster than I expected. They had agents at DIA within 2 hours of our call yesterday. Richard was flagged the moment he checked in under the variant name. They arrested him at Dallas/Fort Worth during his layover. He was cooperative. Cooperative how? He answered their questions. He did not ask for a lawyer, which his eventual lawyer will probably have feelings about. He confirmed his identity. He confirmed his position at the foundation. When they asked him about Summit Strategy Partners, he said, and I'm quoting from the agent's preliminary report, "I was following instructions." Owen went still. Whose instructions? He wouldn't say. He asked for a lawyer at that point. So there's someone else. That's what it looks like. Richard may have been the hands, but someone else may have been the architect. Owen sat with that information for a long time after the call ended. He thought about the shell companies, 4 of them layered professional. Not the work of a man who ordered standing desks and signed authorizations, the work of someone who understood financial architecture at a level that Richard simply did not possess. He thought about Vanessa Cole. She had signed 2 authorizations just under the threshold, precisely calibrated. She had been appointed CEO 14 months ago, 3 weeks after Sarah's death during Owen's medical leave. Appointed by the board. But boards do not appoint people on their own. Someone nominates. Someone advocates. Someone makes the case. Owen picked up the phone and called Daniel again. When Vanessa Cole was appointed, who nominated her? Daniel was quiet. The nomination came from Paul Brennan. Paul Brennan. He presented her credentials at an emergency session, said she had extensive experience in nonprofit leadership, said she was exactly what the foundation needed during a transition period. Did you vet her? I asked for her resume. It was impressive. Columbia MBA, 10 years at 2 major nonprofits in New York, consulting work in Washington. Did you verify any of it? Another pause. Longer this time. No. We were moving quickly. You were in the hospital. Sarah had just died. The board felt we needed immediate leadership. Paul pushed it through and I didn't push back hard enough. Paul Brennan, the quiet one, the one who nods. Yes. Owen thought about Paul. He thought about how Sarah had described him. Good with logistics, doesn't make waves. The kind of person you put on a board because they show up and they don't cause problems. Or the kind of person you put on a board because they will do what they are told and not ask why. I want Helen to pull everything connected to Paul Brennan, every vote, every signature, every communication going back to the day he joined the board. Owen, if Paul is involved, then this isn't just fraud. This was planned before Sarah died, maybe before she was even diagnosed. Daniel was silent for a long moment. I'll have Helen pull it. Owen hung up and sat in the silence of his kitchen. Emma would be home from school in 4 hours. She would come through the door and drop her backpack on the floor and ask what was for dinner. She would ask about the foundation. She would ask if they were still helping the kids. And Owen would have to look at his daughter and give her an answer that was honest without being devastating. He looked at the photograph on the windowsill. Sarah on the hiking trail, laughing, reaching for the camera. I'm going to fix this, whatever it takes, however deep it goes. The photograph did not answer, but he had not expected it to. He had expected only to say it out loud so that it became real, so that it became a promise instead of a thought. By Friday morning, the architecture of the fraud had become clear. Helen called Owen at 8 and asked him to come to the office. When he arrived, she had the full team assembled in the conference room. 5 laptops, 3 whiteboards, and a timeline stretched across the wall that went back 18 months. We traced Meridian Capital Partners. It's a Connecticut holding group. The sole listed officer is a man named Gerald Price. That name also appears on the registration documents for Ridgeline Advisory Group, one of the shell companies. Owen looked at the timeline on the wall. When was Meridian formed? 18 months ago, 6 months before Sarah's diagnosis. The room went cold, not the temperature, something inside Owen, the recognition of how long this had been planned, how patient it had been, how deliberate. They were waiting. Helen nodded. That's what it looks like. Meridian acquired Paul Brennan's logistics company 18 months ago, put him under obligation. Then they waited for an opportunity. Sarah's diagnosis was the opportunity. Her diagnosis created a timeline. They knew the foundation would eventually need new leadership. They knew you would be consumed with her care. They positioned the pieces in advance so that when the moment came, the transition would be fast. Owen stared at the timeline. 6 months before Sarah was diagnosed, someone had been planning this, building the infrastructure, acquiring Paul's company, creating the shells, waiting. And when she died and I collapsed, they moved. Within 3 weeks. Owen sat in the silence of the conference room. He thought about Sarah in the hospital bed, writing on the yellow legal pad. He thought about her handwriting, still clear, still precise. He thought about the line on the last page, "Please don't let the children disappear." She had written that line while the people who would steal from her foundation were already in position. She had written it while Paul Brennan sat on her board and smiled and nodded and waited. "I want Paul brought in. The federal prosecutors are ahead of you. They executed a search warrant on Paul's home this afternoon, found a laptop with encrypted files. The Bureau's digital forensics team is working on it now. And Price, Gerald Price. Still looking. The name may be an alias. The prosecutors think he could be the architect, the one Richard referred to when he said he was following instructions. But until they crack Paul's laptop or Richard starts cooperating more fully, Price is a ghost." Owen stood. He walked to the window. The city stretched out below him, ordinary and indifferent. Somewhere in that city, children were going to school without the programs Sarah had built for them. Somewhere in that city, families were struggling without the support systems that had been dismantled. And somewhere in Connecticut, a man named Gerald Price, if that was his real name, was about to discover that the walls he had built around himself were not as solid as he believed. "Keep working," Owen said. "I want everything." That evening, after Emma was in bed, Owen received another text from the unknown number. "You're making a mistake. Sarah's family wasn't what you think. Ask Daniel about Boston. Ask him what she was running from." Owen stared at the message for a long time. Then he called Daniel. "I need you to tell me about Sarah's family, about Boston." Daniel was quiet. "What do you want to know?" "Everything you haven't told me." Another pause. Longer. "Sarah's family in Boston, her father was Charles Hartwell. Hartwell Properties. $400 million real estate empire." "I know." "Sarah inherited $150 million when he died. She used it to start the foundation." "Did she ever tell you why her family cut her off?" "She said they didn't approve of her marrying a mechanical engineer. They wanted her to marry someone from their social circle." "That's true, but there's more." Daniel's voice was careful. "Sarah's older brother, Marcus Hartwell, was charged with embezzlement from the family company in 2008. Sarah testified against him. He went to prison for 6 years. The family blamed Sarah, cut her off completely. When Charles died in 2011, he left Sarah $150 million, but the will was contested by Marcus, who had been released. Sarah won. She moved to Denver to escape them." Owen felt something shift. If someone is threatening to expose Sarah's past, they might be planning to claim Sarah's inheritance was tainted, that she was involved in her brother's embezzlement. That's insane. Sarah was the whistleblower. But mud sticks. If they start feeding stories to the press about family embezzlement history, it could damage the foundation's reputation, scare donors. Owen was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Let them try. Sarah did nothing wrong. She stood up to her own family. She testified against her brother. That's not a scandal. That's courage." "I agree, but I wanted you prepared." Owen hung up. He sat in the dark kitchen and thought about Sarah at 24 years old, testifying against her own brother, watching her family turn on her, inheriting the money and being dragged through a legal battle, moving across the country to start over, and then years later building something beautiful with that money, something that helped children, only to have her own brother come back. Not with lawyers this time, with shell companies, with patience, with a plan that would not activate until she was too weak to fight it. Owen did not sleep that night. Saturday morning, Helen called. They cracked Paul's laptop. "You need to see this. Now." Owen drove to the office. Helen was waiting in the conference room with her entire team. On the screen was an email chain: Paul, Richard, Vanessa, and a sender identified only as G. Price. Owen read the emails. His hands began to shake. The emails went back 2 years. Instructions from Price to Paul about acquiring board position. Instructions to Richard about creating CFO role. Instructions to Vanessa about staying under approval thresholds. And one email dated 2 months before Sarah's diagnosis that made Owen's blood go cold. The opportunity is coming. When she's weak, we move. She took everything from me. I'm taking everything from her. Price isn't just the architect, Helen said quietly. This was personal for him. Owen looked at the sender name again. G. Price. Who is he? We're running the metadata now, but based on the language in these emails, the prosecutors believe Gerald Price is an alias. Owen's phone rang. It was Daniel. Owen, the FBI just contacted me. They've identified Gerald Price. His real name is Marcus Hartwell, Sarah's brother. He changed his name after he was released from prison in 2014. Owen sat down. The room spun slightly. Marcus. He's been planning this for 7 years. He created Meridian Capital as a shell network, acquired Paul's company, positioned everyone, and then he waited for Sarah to get sick. Owen could not speak. He stared at the email on the screen. She took everything from me. I'm taking everything from her. This was not random fraud. This was Sarah's own brother seeking revenge. Marcus had waited until Sarah was dying, then systematically destroyed her life's work. Where is he now? FBI tracked him to Miami. He purchased a plane ticket this morning. They're moving to detain him now. Owen stood. I want to see him. Owen, I want to see him. By 5 that afternoon, Owen was sitting in a federal building interview room in Miami. Marcus Hartwell, Gerald Price, sat across from him in expensive suit and handcuffs. 56 years old, gray hair, the face of a man who had spent 7 years planning revenge. An FBI agent stood by the door. They had allowed this meeting because Marcus was cooperating, and because Owen had insisted. Marcus smiled when Owen walked in. Owen, the grieving husband. Sarah always said you were too soft. Owen sat down. She testified against you because you stole from your own family. She destroyed me. I spent 6 years in prison, my own sister. You stole $123 million from children. I stole from Sarah. The children were just collateral damage. Owen's hands clenched under the table. You did this while she was dying. Marcus leaned forward. I waited 7 years. I built the perfect trap. I bought Paul. I planted Vanessa. I positioned Richard. When Sarah got sick, I knew I had maybe a year. When she died, I knew you'd collapse. You're weak, Owen. You always were. And for 14 months, you gave me exactly what I needed. Absence. You're going to prison for the rest of your life. Marcus smiled. Maybe. But Sarah's legacy is destroyed. Her precious foundation ruined. Every donor will remember this scandal. Every article about her will mention the embezzlement. I took everything from her, just like she took everything from me. Owen stood. He looked at Marcus for a long moment. You didn't take everything. Emma's still here. The kids in those programs are still here. Sarah's work isn't destroyed. It's damaged. There's a difference. He walked to the door. Then he turned back. You spent 7 years planning revenge on a dead woman. I'm spending the next 20 years making sure you're forgotten. Owen walked out. The flight back to Denver was quiet. Owen stared out the window at the clouds below and thought about Sarah, about what she had survived, her brother's betrayal, her family's rejection, the legal battle for her inheritance, moving to a new city, starting over, building something beautiful, and then at the end writing one line on a yellow legal pad, "Please don't let the children disappear." She had known somehow, maybe not the details, but she had known that after she was gone, people would try to take what she built, and she had trusted Owen to stop them. He had failed her for 14 months, but he was not failing her now. Sunday morning, Owen made pancakes. Emma came into the kitchen and sat at the table. "Dad, are we still helping the kids?" Owen slid a pancake onto her plate. Always. Emma nodded, satisfied. She reached for the syrup. Outside, the April morning was cool and bright. Daffodils along the fence line had come up 2 weeks ago. The same daffodils Sarah had planted the spring before the diagnosis. Owen looked at the photograph on the windowsill, Sarah on the hiking trail laughing. "I think we're doing okay, Sarah. Emma's good. She's really good." He dried his hands. He went to his desk. The Foundation's quarterly report was due Monday. Rachel Donovan, the new executive director he had hired Wednesday, had submitted her program updates that morning. The literacy program in Pueblo had new enrollment numbers, up 40% from the previous quarter. 947 children were now enrolled in the programs that had been defunded 14 months ago, restored and rebuilt and running. Owen opened his laptop and began typing the quarterly report. The opening line came easily. In the first quarter following restructuring, the Sarah Fletcher Children's Foundation has restored all core programs and enrolled 947 children across 6 states. He typed for an hour. When he finished, he looked out the window. Light snow was falling, not heavy. The kind of April snow that arrives apologetically and retreats by noon. It landed on the daffodils along the fence line and stayed for a moment, just long enough to be noticed, and then it was gone. The daffodils did not bend. They had survived the winter. They had pushed through frozen ground and opened in the cold spring air, because that is what they were built to do. Owen looked at the daffodils. He looked at Sarah's photograph. He looked at the screen in front of him with the enrollment numbers that his wife would have celebrated and his daughter would have nodded at with quiet satisfaction. The morning was bright. The house was warm. Somewhere down the road, Emma was at school carrying her backpack with the cards still in the front pocket because she had decided it belonged with her. The winter had not broken them. It had revealed them. Monday morning arrived with pressure, not the weather. The sky was clear, the April air warming, but the kind of pressure that builds when decisions made in private are about to become public. Owen woke at 5:30 and knew he would not go back to sleep. He made coffee and sat at the kitchen table and opened the news on his phone. The Denver Post had published at 6. The headline was careful lawyered but unmistakable. Fletcher Foundation under federal investigation following alleged $123 million fraud. The story had most of it: Summit Strategy Partners, defunded programs, Richard Holloway's arrest. It did not yet have Marcus Hartwell's name. The FBI was holding that until formal charges were filed, but it had enough to create the narrative. Owen read the article twice. It was fair. It was factual. It would still destroy donor confidence for months. Daniel called at 6:15. "The Post story is everywhere. CNN picked it up. So did the Times. We're going to need to get ahead of this." Helen suggested a press conference. "When?" "Friday, day after tomorrow. It gives her time to prepare a public summary, gives the prosecutors a heads up." "Friday," Owen repeated. "Set it up." He hung up and looked at the clock. Emma would be awake in an hour. He needed to tell her before she heard it from someone else. She came into the kitchen at 7:30, already dressed for school. She sat down across from him and poured cereal into her bowl with the careful precision of someone performing a familiar ritual. "Dad, people are going to talk about us today." Owen looked at her. "What do you mean?" "At school. The kids saw the video. Now there's going to be news." She took a bite of cereal. "It's okay. I know what to say." "What are you going to say?" "The truth. That some people stole money from Mom's foundation, that you're fixing it, that we're still helping the kids." Owen felt his throat tighten. 8 years old, and she had already learned how to stand in front of a world that would ask her questions she should not have to answer. "If anyone gives you trouble—" "They won't. Mrs. Peterson said if anyone's mean, they get detention." She looked up at him. "Can I come to the press conference?" "Emma, I want to come. I want to say something." Owen thought about objecting, thought about protecting her from cameras and questions and public scrutiny. But then he remembered Emma standing in the ballroom holding the damaged card up to Sarah's portrait. Not performing, not crying, Just being honest about what mattered. Okay. But only if you want to. You don't have to say anything. I know. But I will. The foundation offices felt different Tuesday morning. The auditors were still there, but the atmosphere had shifted from investigation to preparation. Helen's team had moved from finding evidence to packaging it for prosecutors and public consumption. Owen met with Helen at 9. She had printed the preliminary report, 83 pages, 3 appendices, a timeline that covered 2 walls of the conference room. The prosecutors want to move fast. They're filing formal charges against Richard this week, Marcus and Paul by Friday. Vanessa's lawyer is negotiating a plea she's willing to testify in exchange for reduced charges. What's she offering? Full cooperation. She says Richard told her the payments were legitimate consulting fees. She says she didn't know about the shell companies until October. She says when she found out Marcus threatened her. Do you believe her? Helen considered this. I believe she signed the authorizations. I believe she was paid well to not ask questions. Whether she knew the full scope from the beginning or figured it out halfway through, that's for a jury to decide. And the 5th shell company you mentioned? Confirmed. Horizon Trust Services. Connecticut registration, same address network. Total exposure is now $138 million. Owen wrote the number down. $138 million. Gone from programs. Gone from the endowment. Converted into wire transfers and shell company accounts and whatever lifestyle Marcus Hartwell had been living while he waited for his sister to die. Can we recover any of it? Some. Maybe 30-40 million if we're lucky. The rest is scattered across accounts in different states. It'll take years to trace, and even then much of it has probably been moved or spent. Owen nodded. He had expected that answer. Recovery would be slow, but restoration could be fast. I'm funding the program restart myself, $1 million from my personal accounts this week. That covers immediate operational costs for 6 months. After that, we'll need new donors. You'll get them. The press conference will help. People want to support the foundation now. They want to be part of the fix. Owen hoped she was right. Wednesday morning, Emma made a second card at the kitchen table. Fresh index card, fresh glitter glue, fresh purple marker. The bow was more precise this time, she had practiced. When she finished, she held both cards up side by side, the old damaged one and the new pristine one. Dad, can I bring both to the press conference? Yeah, the old one shows what happened. The new one shows we're not giving up. Owen looked at his daughter. That's perfect. She packed both cards carefully into her backpack. Thursday afternoon, Daniel called with news that shifted the ground again. The prosecutors found something in Marcus's financial records. He didn't just steal from the foundation. He's been living off Sarah's inheritance the whole time. Owen sat down. What do you mean? When Sarah won the legal battle in 2011, she got $150 million. But there was a settlement. Marcus received $5 million to drop his appeal. He was supposed to use it to restart his life. Instead, he spent 4 years building Meridian Capital and the Shell Network. By the time he activated the fraud, he was nearly broke. The foundation money didn't just fund his revenge, it funded his life. So the entire scheme was about money and revenge. Both. He wanted to destroy what Sarah built, and he wanted to get rich doing it. Owen thought about Marcus in that interview room. The smile, the arrogance. I took everything from her. He took nothing. He stole money. He delayed programs. But he didn't touch what mattered. What mattered? The decision. The simple decision that children deserve help. You can't steal that with a wire transfer. Daniel was quiet for a moment. That's what you should say tomorrow. Tomorrow? The press conference. That's the message. They stole money. You're replacing it. They delayed programs. You're restarting them. They attacked the foundation, but the foundation is the decision to help, not the bank account. Owen wrote it down. Friday morning arrived cold and clear. Owen woke Emma at 6:30. They ate breakfast in silence, not uncomfortable, just focused. Emma was wearing her school clothes, not the velvet dress. She had both cards in her backpack. Nervous? Owen asked. A little. Are you? Yeah. Good. Mom always said if you're not nervous, you're not paying attention. They drove to the foundation offices. The conference room had been prepared overnight. Helen's team had worked until 2 in the morning. The photographs were back on the walls. The organizational timeline that Sarah had insisted on installing in 2017 was back on the east wall, showing every program launched, every milestone reached, every child served. 31 journalists sat in folding chairs facing a long table at the front of the room. 4 cameras. 6 board members along the side wall, Daniel at the end of the table, Helen behind him, not visible to the cameras but close enough to advise. Owen walked to the front. Emma walked beside him. He adjusted the microphone. My name is Owen Fletcher. I am the sole trustee of the Sarah Fletcher Memorial Trust. My wife Sarah built this foundation over 11 years to serve children in transitional housing, educational programs, and family support services across 6 states. He paused. 31 journalists waited. 14 months ago, my wife died. I stepped away from the foundation. During my absence, individuals within the organization's leadership systematically defunded the core programs my wife created and redirected foundation funds, including endowment principal, to a network of shell companies. The total amount we have identified so far is approximately $138 million. The room shifted. Pens moved. Cameras adjusted. The after-school tutoring initiative that served 400 children in Denver has been suspended for 5 months. The Transitional Housing Stipend Program in Colorado Springs has been defunded. The school supply distribution network that operated in 4 counties for 9 years has been shut down. And the Children's Literacy Program in rural Colorado, a program my wife built personally, a program that served 900 children, was quietly eliminated 6 months ago and its funding absorbed into fraudulent administrative accounts. Owen looked at the journalists. He did not raise his voice. The federal authorities have been contacted. A forensic audit is complete. 1 individual has been detained. Others are under investigation. Formal charges will be filed by the U.S. Attorney's Office within the week. I cannot discuss the details of the ongoing federal case, but I can tell you what we are doing right now. He laid out the plan. The literacy program in Pueblo would be restarted immediately that week with emergency funding from his personal accounts. The tutoring initiative would resume within 30 days. The housing stipend program would be restored by end of month. The supply distribution network would be operational by end of quarter. An independent oversight committee would be established with no affiliation to Greystone or the Fletcher family. Financial statements would be published quarterly and made available to any donor or member of the public who requested them. A new executive director, Rachel Donovan, formerly of Minneapolis Housing Initiative, had been hired and would implement Sarah's original program framework with enhanced accountability measures. He spoke for 9 minutes. He did not use notes. He did not stumble. He said what needed to be said, and he said it clearly, and he stopped when he was done. My daughter would like to say something. Emma stood up. She stepped to the microphone. She was holding both cards, one in each hand, the old damaged one and the new pristine one. She held them up so the cameras could see them. My mom built this. Her voice was steady and clear, and it carried to the back of the room without effort. And some people tried to take it, but we're not going to let them. She looked at the cameras, then at her father, then back at the cameras. My mom said, "Don't give up. So, don't give up." She stepped back. She sat down. She placed both cards on the table in front of her side by side, the damaged one and the new one, and she folded her hands in her lap. The room was silent. 31 journalists and 4 cameras and 6 board members and not a sound. The silence lasted 3 seconds. 4, 5. Then someone in the back row started clapping. A woman. Owen did not see who. And the room joined. Not the thunderous applause of a ballroom, something smaller, more certain, more precise. The kind of applause that is not celebrating a performance but acknowledging a truth. Emma looked up at her father. Was that okay? Owen put his arm around her. That was perfect. The questions came after. Owen answered them for 40 minutes. He was direct. He was specific where he could be and honest about what he could not discuss. When a journalist asked if he blamed himself for being absent, he answered without hesitation, "Yes, I confused absence with protection, and in doing so I left the thing my wife cared most about in the hands of people who did not care about it at all." When another journalist asked about Vanessa Cole, Owen said only that her employment had been terminated and that her involvement was a matter for the federal investigation. When asked about Richard Holloway, he said the same. When asked about Marcus Hartwell, the reporter had gotten the name from a source. Owen paused. Then he said, "Marcus Hartwell is Sarah's brother. He was released from prison in 2014 after serving 6 years for embezzlement. He spent 7 years planning revenge on his sister for testifying against him. He built the infrastructure for this fraud before Sarah was even diagnosed. He waited for her to get sick. He waited for her to die. And then he stole from the foundation she built to help children. That tells you everything you need to know about him." The journalist followed up, "Do you have a message for him?" Owen looked directly at the camera. "You spent 7 years planning revenge on a dead woman. I'm spending the next 20 making sure you're forgotten." The last question came from a reporter in the front row, a man Owen's age with gray hair and a notebook instead of a laptop. "Mr. Fletcher, your wife's foundation raised nearly $4 million a year. The amount stolen is 30 times that. Where did the rest of the money come from?" "The endowment. Sarah's philanthropic endowment, which I funded from her inheritance, was the foundation's reserve. It was supposed to ensure the programs could continue for decades, even if annual fundraising declined. They didn't just steal from the operating budget. They went into the principal. They took the future." The reporter wrote that down. He looked up. "And you're going to replace it?" "I'm going to rebuild it, however long it takes." The press conference ended. The journalists filed out. The cameras were packed up. Owen sat at the table with Emma and did not move for a long time. Helen came over and put her hand on his shoulder briefly, then left. Daniel came over and sat down across from him and said nothing, which was the right thing to say. Emma picked up the old card and looked at it. The glitter was almost gone now. The purple ink had faded to pale violet. The heel mark was still visible in the bottom corner. The bow was long gone. "Dad, can we put this somewhere safe?" "Where would you like to put it?" "On Mom's wall at the office, with the pictures of the kids." Owen looked at his daughter, 8 years old, holding a damaged card that she had made at the kitchen table while he stood at the stove pretending not to watch. A card that had been stepped on and soaked and carried in a backpack pocket for 2 weeks and held up in front of 300 people at a ballroom and 31 journalists at a press conference. "Yeah, we can do that." They drove to the foundation's office that afternoon. Owen walked Emma to the north wall of the main lobby, the wall where the photographs had been restored. He found a small frame in the supply closet. Emma placed the old card inside it, carefully smoothing the wrinkled corners one last time. Owen hung it on the wall between a photograph of a girl at a graduation ceremony and a photograph of a family standing in front of their new apartment. Emma stepped back and looked at it. "It fits." Owen looked at the card on the wall, damaged and faded and real, surrounded by photographs of children whose lives had been changed by the foundation his wife had built. The card did not match the photographs. It was not professional. It was not polished. It was an index card with smeared glitter and purple ink made by an 8-year-old girl at a kitchen table. It was the most important thing on the wall. "Yeah, it fits." They stood together in front of the wall for a while, father and daughter, and neither of them spoke. Because some moments do not need words. They need only the presence of the people who understand what the silence means. The donations began that afternoon. Not the large institutional gifts, those came later after due diligence calls and board reassurances and legal reviews that moved at the particular speed of organizations protecting themselves from liability. The first donations were small. $20, $50, $100. They came from individuals, people who had watched a clip of a girl in a red velvet dress hold up a damaged card and say, "Don't give up." People who had decided sitting in their kitchens and their offices and their cars in parking lots during lunch breaks that they believed her. By the end of the first day, there were 600 contributions. By the end of the first week, over 4,000. The total passed $2 million before Owen had finished reviewing the foundation's restructuring plan with the reconstituted board. Helen called him Saturday morning. "You should see the donor messages. We're logging them as they come in. Most of them are a sentence or two. Some of them are longer. A woman in Ohio sent $50 and wrote that her daughter had been in transitional housing when she was 7 and that a school supply program had given her a backpack, and it was the first new thing she had ever owned." Owen was at the kitchen table. Emma was eating cereal across from him, reading a book propped against the milk carton. He listened to Helen and watched his daughter turn a page. "Keep logging them, everyone. There's something else. I got a call this morning from the Whitmore Family Foundation in Chicago. They want to discuss a major gift. Their initial indication is 7 figures. Who are they? Old money, 3rd generation. They fund education and housing initiatives across the Midwest. They said they've been watching the story and they want to talk. Set up a call for Monday." By the end of the second week, 11 organizations had reached out. Corporations, family foundations, a university endowment in California. One by one, they contacted Daniel or Helen or Owen directly and said variations of the same thing. "We saw what happened. We want to help. What do you need?" Owen worked with the reconstituted board through late April and into May. He was at the foundation offices by 7 every morning and home by 6 every evening because Emma needed dinner and homework help and the particular stability of a father who showed up at the same time every day. He did not miss a single evening. Sarah had taught him that. She had run a $4 million a year foundation, and she had never missed dinner. She used to say, "The work is important, but the table is sacred." He had not understood that fully until now. The restructuring took longer than he had hoped and moved more thoughtfully than he had originally planned, which meant it was done correctly. Helen's oversight framework was implemented in full. Every program was reviewed. Every allocation was cross-referenced against its original purpose. Every vendor relationship was audited. The board was reduced from 9 members to 5, each personally vetted by Owen and Daniel. The 3 members who had enabled the fraud, Paul Brennan and 2 others who had voted for the budget reallocations without asking sufficient questions, were removed. Paul was facing federal charges. The other 2 were facing civil liability and the particular social consequences that accompany having your name in a federal fraud indictment. Rachel Donovan started on a Saturday. She was in the office before Owen arrived, which had not happened to him in a very long time. She had already pulled the enrollment records for every program and spread them across the conference table in color-coded stacks. The literacy program can be back to full capacity by June, the tutoring initiative by May. The housing stipends are more complicated because the partner organizations need to reactivate their referral networks, but I can have that running by end of quarter, and the supply distribution, that's the easy one. The volunteers never actually stopped. They've been running it on their own out of pocket since the official funding was cut. 3 women in a church gymnasium east of Colorado Springs have been buying school supplies with their own money for 5 months. Rachel shook her head. "Your wife built something that people refused to let die even when the funding disappeared. Do you understand how rare that is?" Owen understood. He understood it in a way that he could not articulate and did not try to. The board voted unanimously in early May to rename the foundation. The motion had come from Daniel. He had written a 1-paragraph proposal that he read aloud at the board meeting in a voice that was steady until the last sentence, when it was not. The foundation was always an expression of Sarah's purpose. It should carry Emma's name forward because it is Emma's generation the work is for. Owen had not expected the proposal. He had not been consulted. He sat at the board table and listened to Daniel read the paragraph and felt something in his chest that was not grief and was not joy, but was somewhere between the two in a territory he had not known existed. He looked at Daniel. "Does Emma know about this?" "I wanted your approval first." "You have it, but I want to tell her myself." He told her that evening at the kitchen table. They were eating pasta. Emma had learned to make garlic bread the previous week and had produced a loaf that was aggressively buttered and slightly burned on one side and delicious. The board wants to rename the foundation. Emma looked up from her pasta. Rename it what? The Emma Fletcher Foundation. She put her fork down. She looked at him for a long time. She did not speak. Her eyes moved across his face in the way children's eyes move when they are trying to determine if something is real. My name. Your name. But it's Mom's foundation. It is, and Mom built it for children. For kids like you? Daniel said it should carry your name because you're the generation the work is for. Emma thought about this. She thought about it with the seriousness of an 8-year-old who has learned in the past several months that the world is more complicated than she had been told, and that names carry weight, and that the things adults build can be taken away if no one is watching. Okay, but Mom's name stays too. What do you mean? On the wall at the office where the pictures are. Mom's name should still be there so the kids know who started it. It will be, I promise. Emma picked her fork back up. Okay, can I have more garlic bread? The Emma Fletcher Foundation held its first event under the new name in late May. Not a gala. Rachel had been firm about that. No galas, not yet. Maybe not ever. The first event should be a site visit. Put the board and the donors in the rooms where the work actually happens. Let them see what the money does. 43 board members, donors, and staff traveled to 3 program locations in Colorado over the course of a single day. They saw a literacy classroom in a converted community center outside Pueblo where 22 children were sitting on a carpeted floor listening to a teacher read aloud from a chapter book. They saw a transitional housing unit in Denver where a family of 4 had recently moved in, and the mother was standing in the kitchen looking at the stove as though she could not quite believe it was hers. They saw the school supply distribution running out of the church gymnasium in the small agricultural town east of Colorado Springs, staffed entirely by volunteers, 3 women who had kept it going with their own money for 5 months because they refused to let the children go without. Emma went to all 3 sites. At the literacy classroom, a boy around her age approached her after the reading session. He had dark hair and serious eyes, and he was holding the book the teacher had been reading from. Are you the one from the news? Yes. He thought about this. My teacher read us the story. She said you were brave. I wasn't brave. I was just there. That's what brave means. My teacher said brave means you show up even when it's hard. Emma looked at him. He looked back at her. They stood there for a moment in the way children stand when they recognize that they are in the presence of someone who understands what a hard year feels like. What's your name? Miguel. Do you like the reading program? Yeah, I didn't used to like reading, but now I do. The teacher says I'm getting good. My mom started this program a long time ago, before I was born. Miguel looked at the book in his hands. Tell her thank you. Emma's face changed just slightly, a movement around her eyes that was not sadness and was not joy, but was the thing between them. I will. Outside the church gymnasium, the late May sun was warm enough to soften the last of the snow along the fence line. Owen stood with Rachel and watched Emma talking to 2 girls near the gymnasium door. The girls were showing Emma their new backpacks. Emma was examining the backpacks with the same serious attention she had given to the card she made at the kitchen table. She's remarkable. She is. Her mother was too. Owen watched Emma for another moment. Her mother was too. It was a Tuesday in early June when something changed. Small, almost invisible. The kind of change that only happens in a house where grief has been living for a long time and has finally quietly begun to loosen its grip. Emma came into the kitchen before school and found Owen at the stove. He was making pancakes. This was not unusual. Tuesday pancakes had been their tradition since Emma was 4. But Owen was also humming. Something tuneless and absent-minded. The kind of humming a person does when they are not thinking about whether they are humming. He had not hummed in the kitchen in a very long time. Emma noticed. She said nothing about it. She sat at the table and put her backpack on the floor and watched him flip a pancake with the confidence of a man who has made approximately 10,000 pancakes and is quietly aware of his expertise. "Dad, are we still helping the kids?" He slid the pancake onto a plate. He put the plate in front of her. He sat down across from her the way he did every Tuesday morning, the way he had done every Tuesday morning for 4 years, the way Sarah used to sit down across from both of them before everything changed. Always. Emma nodded, satisfied. She reached for the syrup. She poured it with the generosity of a child who has not yet learned restraint with maple syrup, and Owen did not correct her because some battles are not worth fighting, and syrup is every single one of them. After Emma left for school, Owen washed the dishes. He stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the yard. The June morning was cool and bright. The daffodils along the fence line had bloomed in April and were gone now, replaced by the first buds of summer flowers. The same garden bed Sarah had tended the spring before the diagnosis. The photograph on the windowsill showed Sarah on the hiking trail laughing, one hand extended toward the camera trying to stop him from taking the picture. He had taken it anyway. He had been glad ever since. "I think we're doing okay, Sarah. Emma's good. She's really good." He dried his hands. He went to his desk. He opened his laptop. The Foundation's quarterly report had been published the previous week. Rachel had included her program updates with 3 exclamation points after the literacy enrollment numbers. 947 children were now enrolled in the programs that had been defunded 14 months ago. Restored and rebuilt and running, Rachel's team projected 1,200 by end of year, 1,500 by the following year with the new funding commitments. None of those children would ever know about the night at the Aspen Crown Hotel. They would never know about Vanessa Cole or Richard Holloway or Marcus Hartwell or the shell companies in Delaware or the $138 million that had been stolen. They would never know about the heel coming down on the card or the security guards moving toward the door or the 60 people in the lobby who watched. They would know only that there was a program, that there was a teacher, that there was a book, that someone somewhere at some point had decided that they were worth the effort. That was what Sarah had always said the work was about. Not the galas, not the grants, not the press conferences, or the quarterly reports, or the corporate partnerships, but the decision repeated quietly in classrooms and housing offices and church gymnasiums that a child's circumstances were not their destiny. Owen opened a new document and began drafting the letter he would send to the major donors who had reached out over the past 2 months. The Whitmore Family Foundation had committed $2.5 million over 3 years. Others had followed. The foundation's endowment would not be fully restored for a decade, maybe longer, but it would be restored, and in the meantime the programs would run. He typed for an hour. When he finished, he looked out the window again. The morning had opened fully now. The sky was clear. The garden was green. Somewhere down the road, Emma was at school learning things, carrying her backpack with the new card in the front pocket, the pristine one she had made to replace the damaged one. She had decided the new card belonged with her now. The old one belonged on the wall with the children. Owen thought about that choice. The wisdom in it, the understanding that some things are meant to be kept safe and some things are meant to be carried. He closed the laptop and stood. He had a meeting with Rachel at 10 to review the fall program expansion. He had a call with the Whitmore Foundation at 11. He had to pick Emma up from school at 3:30. The work continued. It would always continue. That was the point. Not that the foundation was perfect or that the fraud had never happened or that grief had been conquered, but that the decision to help children, the simple, stubborn, unbreakable decision, was stronger than the people who had tried to destroy it. Because Sarah had not built a budget line or an endowment or an organizational structure, she had built a conviction. And convictions, Owen was learning, cannot be stolen with wire transfers. They can only be abandoned or defended. He chose to defend. The June afternoon was warm when Owen picked Emma up from school. She climbed into the car and buckled her seatbelt and said, "Dad, my teacher asked if I wanted to talk to the class about the foundation." "What did you say?" "I said yes. I'm going to bring the new card. I'm going to tell them about Mom. I'm going to tell them what happened. And I'm going to tell them we didn't give up." Owen looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. 8 years old. Already teaching the lesson her mother had spent a lifetime proving, that the work of protecting children from disappearing is never finished, that it requires showing up, that it requires not giving up. Mom would be proud of you. I know. Not with arrogance, with the plain certainty of a child who has learned what her mother valued and chosen to carry it forward. They drove home through the late afternoon light. The mountains were visible in the distance, still capped with snow that would not melt until July. The city stretched between them and the peaks, ordinary and complex, and filled with children whose lives would be changed by decisions being made in classrooms and housing offices and church gymnasiums by people they would never meet. 947 so far. 1,200 by year's end. 1,500 the year after. And growing, always growing, because someone had decided they were worth the effort. Owen pulled into the driveway. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt and grabbed her backpack. She paused before getting out. Dad, can we have pancakes on Saturday too? Not just Tuesday? Owen smiled. Yeah, we can have pancakes on Saturday. Good, because Tuesdays aren't enough. She climbed out and ran to the front door. Owen followed more slowly, watching her go. The girl who had stood on wet stone steps and refused to cry. The girl who had held a damaged card up to her mother's portrait and said 3 words that became a promise. The girl who was learning day by day that grief and hope are not opposites but companions, and that the work of honoring what was lost is inseparable from the work of building what comes next. Inside, Emma dropped her backpack by the door. Owen would make her pick it up later, and went straight to the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator and pulled out the milk. She poured herself a glass with the same generous hand she used for syrup. Dad, I'm hungry. Dinner's in an hour. Can I have a snack? 1 snack. She grabbed an apple and bit into it and stood at the counter looking at the photograph on the windowsill. Sarah on the hiking trail, laughing. I miss her. Owen came and stood beside his daughter. Me too. But she'd be happy right about the foundation. Owen thought about Sarah in the hospital bed, writing on the yellow legal pad with hands that shook. Please don't let the children disappear. She had written it knowing she would not be there to prevent it. She had written it as an act of faith that someone would. Yeah, she'd be happy. Emma finished her apple and threw the core away and washed her hands. I'm going to do homework. She picked up her backpack and headed to her room. Owen heard the door close, heard her settle at her desk, heard the ordinary sounds of a child doing ordinary things in a house where life was continuing. He looked at Sarah's photograph one more time. We're doing okay. Better than okay. The kids are back in the programs. Emma's strong. The foundation is stronger. And the people who tried to destroy it, they're gone. Richard Marcus, Vanessa Cole, all of them gone. Charged. Awaiting trial. Already forgotten by the children whose lives they tried to ruin. He paused. You were right, Sarah. About all of it. The children matter. Their circumstances are not their destiny. And the work of proving that must never stop. He turned from the window. The evening stretched ahead. Dinner to make. Homework to check. A daughter to tuck in. A foundation to rebuild. A future to build that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. Outside, the June light was golden. The garden was green. The mountains stood in the distance, permanent and indifferent witnesses to every choice made in their shadow. And somewhere in a small frame on a wall in a foundation office, a damaged card with purple marker and faded glitter sat between photographs of children who would grow up never knowing how close they came to disappearing. But they had not disappeared. Someone had decided they were worth the effort. Someone had refused to give up. And that decision, simple, stubborn, unbreakable, would outlast every shell company, every wire transfer, every act of theft or revenge or abandonment that humans in their weakness could devise. Because Sarah had been right about something else too. Something she had never said aloud but had proven through 11 years of work. That the strongest things in the world are not made of steel or stone or money. They are made of decisions, and decisions once made with conviction and defended with courage, become permanent in ways that buildings and bank accounts never can. Owen started dinner. Emma's homework sounds drifted from her room. The house settled into its evening rhythm. And in that rhythm, ordinary, unremarkable, profoundly precious, was everything Sarah had worked for. Not perfection, not victory, not the absence of loss or pain or struggle, just the continuation, the showing up, the refusal to let the children disappear. The winter had not broken them, it had revealed them, and what it revealed was strong enough to build on.